Hey everyone. So we had to talk about mangoes, sort of, and it's almost lunchtime. So let's talk about infrastructure networks. Super, super interesting, especially after thinking about food. So I'm Abhay Kumar. I am at the Helium Foundation. I've actually been a part of the Helium network since we launched our own blockchain back in 2019. Back then, we were trying to build a wireless network. And the problem that happens often when you build a full stack, everything from a sensor to a gateway to the backhaul system to the data plane and everything is what happens when you leave your campus? What happens when you want to use somebody else's network? You're not going to go around town and ask everyone for their Wi-Fi password so that your sensor or your phone or whatever device you created can work there. And this is a real problem. Helium started as a company, a for-profit company, Helium Systems Inc., and they were building tracking solutions and temperature-related tracking solutions for cold supply chain. We were one of the first to really deploy one of the largest networks out there. And over time, actually back in 2022, the folks at Masari came up with this acronym called DePIN, Decentralized Physical Infrastructure Networks. I almost tried to meme back then, like, can we call them HITINs, Helium-inspired networks? But that didn't really seem to land. But this is what sort of an update of what they published. And this was released, I think, a few weeks ago. And this includes a lot of different kinds of networks. This is what DePIN networks can be, right? They're everything from wireless networks, geospatial networks, mobility networks, storage networks, compute networks. There are a bunch of Solana projects on that screen, right? Obviously, we're there, but there's also HiveMapper. There's Genesis Go in the storage side of things. And then there are several others there that I could just sort of go on and on. But one thing that's important to think about is what is a DePIN and what isn't. Generally thinking like anything, you can claim anything as a physical infrastructure network. There's some claims out there that Bitcoin was a DePIN. Doesn't really make sense to me. Like ultimately, maybe the closest to that I would think about would be like something like a pool of miners in Bitcoin, right? You want to actually have some amount of collaboration in order to generate some kind of utility, because you have a set of excess capacity, and you want to actually provide that permissionlessly to any user that might be out there. And so, you certainly can hear about how DePINs can bring the sort of next million users in crypto or the next billion users in crypto, and I really do think that's possible. But none of these users are really thinking about crypto first, right? And I think that's really what drove Helium. And from the beginning, we sort of built this application. It was a mobile app and a very, very simple piece of hardware that you sort of press a button on there, you open up your mobile app, you connect over BLE, and now you have a wallet. And now you're learning about radios. And now you found this Discord. And there's 180,000 people on there who are posting about how this kind of antenna might be better than this kind of antenna. And that's really what happens with these kinds of networks. We also had an incentive model. There was an incentive to deploy these networks because we were deploying an Internet of Things network that didn't have a lot of users at the time, and on this protocol called LoRaWAN that had a ton of sensors but not a lot of deployments yet, we needed to sort of bootstrap that marketplace. We needed to bootstrap that network. So we had this incentivization model, and that's sort of the layer on top of DePINs that I think is possible. You don't need to have incentivization for a DePIN. You can just pay for usage. But in order to bootstrap a network, you need to start providing some initial kinds of emissions, some initial kind of liquidity. So the Helium network today is two kinds of networks. We started off as an IoT network, and last year we launched a mobile network, and a few months ago a carrier launched for the first time on that mobile network as well. And on the IoT network you earn IoT tokens. On the mobile network you own mobile tokens. But ultimately all these things are part of a single economy, the HNT economy. And to use this network, you burn HNT to actually connect your device, or to pay for your cell phone plan, or for the carrier to pay for access on the network. And ultimately, these kinds of incentivization models build incredible permissionless coverage all over the world. And these are some of the wild installations, some of whom are probably here in Amsterdam, and certainly some of whom were deployed all over Portugal last year, the last time I was here at Breakpoint. And so, what's the difference here? Like, these are individuals. Love that guy right there with the Helium logo right there. And these are individuals that were climbing on top of roofs. They were learning about things like signal propagation and learning about things like line of sight. A lot of these folks are novices to both crypto and to radios. And they were able to join this network, and they were able to get help from their sort of fellow deployers, and they were able to also figure out really basic things like, how do I keep my 12 words safe? For the love of God, please don't take a screenshot and put it into iCloud. That's a bad idea, if you haven't heard that already. But these are things that people are learning about in our community. And we had this incredible moderation team that we built over time. Tens of volunteers, some of whom now work at the foundation, some of whom work at other companies, some of whom are building real applications on these networks. And these are sort of folks who helped each other, and this is like sort of what you hope to have in a network like this. When we think about our community and our network, we have it's not a couple thousand people that might be LPs, or a couple thousand folks that might want to sort of pay for some sort of services. We're thinking about tens of thousands, potentially hundreds of thousands of deployers all over a country, and then never mind the rest of the world. And they were able to build these enormous networks that look something like this. And this is our IoT network, deployed over the last 4 years, which would be really unheard of in any kind of telecom context. So we have fantastic coverage in the United States, in Europe, parts of Asia, but we still have giant black holes, and I think that's really important to think about as well. They're able to create this so quickly, and we really, really hope to be able to fill the world here. But one IoT hotspot is able to create a tremendous amount of coverage, several square kilometers of coverage. But what does that really get you? It really enables applications, and we're really starting to see these organically. And it's always fun when you build a product, when somebody comes to you and tells you, hey, we built this thing already because it just worked. Right? That kind of organic usage is what you hope to see. And so I wanted to talk about a couple of really great examples that we've seen just in the last couple of months. And the reality is somebody's probably working on one of these next. And so this is a company called LimeLoop. They make reusable packaging. These are mailers. I've got 2 kids. We use Amazon and Target. I'm based in the U.S., so we buy stuff on Amazon and Target all the time. And there's boxes coming in. We have to break them down. It's a giant pain. But imagine if all of your packages were these kind of reusable containers. So things like returns were really, really simple. You just put it right back in. And what's magical about these packaging, not only are they made out of recycled materials, but if you're done with it, you just sort of zip it up and you just put it back in the mail. And it has a return mailing label in it. Or if you actually want to put a return, you put it in there, you zip it up, and you put it in the mail. And it embedded inside of the lining of this container is a LoRaWAN tracker. And that LoRaWAN tracker gives the customer and the e-commerce provider exact knowledge of where that package is, better than UPS or DHL or in the US, the United States Postal Service could tell you. I mean, I've certainly had packages that once it gets in the mail, I don't really know that it's going to be delivered until the moment the postman rings my doorbell. And this is really only possible when you have ubiquitous coverage. I met this, and similar to this, I met this shop owner down in California, and he sells. It's a bit wonky. He sells parts for exotic cars. And so, when you have somebody who you're shipping across country, a several $1,000, sort of part. Putting a $10 tracker in the box is a very easy thing, and he just built this himself. right? He found, he logged in the Helium console, he registered his device, he was able to create a tracking dashboard using open source tools like DataCake to sort of pipe all that data across, and he was able to tell his probably high network individual customer that yeah, your tips or whatever are going to get there soon, so this is possible at the sort of simple scale, like people like us buying stuff on Amazon, all the way to sort of the sort of high end. And I think the other really great example on tracking and tracing, I think that we saw yesterday was Svi at Baxis talked about how they're using Helium sensors to track where the bottles are in their vaults. They are a vaulting solution for things like wine and whiskey and barrels, and where they are, what the temperature is at the entire time. Imagining having to, some of these like really fancy whiskeys have to be aged for 40 years. Imagine keeping one of those barrels for 40 years and not knowing what the temperature was over time. And imagine being a buyer of that barrel and not really knowing like what happened. What am I buying? You don't really know until you pour it. And it's even worse in wine. The trick often with wine buying is that you don't really care because you hand the bottle over and that's gone. It's not your problem anymore. So, tracking solutions can be pretty incredible. And then I think the other really, really amazing story that I saw recently, and this happened maybe close to home for folks here, a couple of weeks ago, there was a storm in Portugal, Storm Helene, and there's a company based there that was able to use the ubiquitous coverage of Helium and the sensors that they deployed. This is a company called Green Metrics, to figure out where floods were happening near real time. So they embedded in the sort of equivalent of an emergency management department, an emergency response department, and they were able to respond to 12 different flooding incidents as they were happening or before they caused millions of dollars of damage, right? And I think you can see some of the sensors on some of these poles in there. But they had a view of the entire city, and they were able to say, well, here's where we need to send emergency personnel before it happens. And that's because you have incredibly redundant and ubiquitous coverage. So these are some of the IoT use cases. I could probably talk about this for the rest of my time here, and I know I'm already running long, so I'm going to switch to the other interesting network that we have, which is the mobile use case. So I mentioned a few months ago a company that licensed the Helium name and a team that licensed the Helium name launched a carrier, and they were able to launch this in Miami. And what's interesting about mobile networks is that there are sort of typically two actors. You have mobile network operators in the US, folks like Verizon or T-Mobile, folks like Vodafone, and Hutch internationally, and then you have mobile virtual network operators. These are folks that build on top of the infrastructure, right? They use systems that are deployed by Orange and Vodafone and T-Mobile, and so what's interesting about this product is that it's a hybrid product. Where there is Helium hotspot, where there is a Helium hotspot for 5G access or for Wi-Fi access, it is able to use that device for backhaul. And everywhere else in the country, in the United States at least, T-Mobile just works, right? So, as I kind of go back to the point that I made earlier, all of our users don't really care about crypto, and they don't really care about decentralization yet. We will teach them. It'll take some time, but we'll teach them why it matters. But this is why it matters. It's able to provide a seamless customer experience. It's able to provide an incredibly cheap rate. $5 is kind of absurd, and that's kind of their point, I think. But it's possible because they're able to incentivize coverage in a specific area, and this is something that service providers can do on the Helium network. They're able to tell deployers that here's where we believe our customers are. Will you please send more hotspots? And so a deployer now has a reason to. They basically, the chain told them where to deploy, right? And that's really what, and there's a really great feedback mechanism here as well, where the user themselves can also opt into mapping that network and then continue to improve, right? You have continuous feedback to these service providers of where they should be sort of incentivizing more coverage. And that kind of flywheel is something that we always hope for in any of these kinds of networks and any of these kinds of systems. And so, yeah, you can earn tokens for mapping the network. You can earn tokens for deploying the coverage. And then I think, piece de resistance is being able to pay with those mobile rewards that you're actually already doing. And they launched this a couple of weeks ago, really simply, where you just send up some mobile tokens with a memo. But I could imagine, and I'm sure some of the engineers in the audience could imagine, building this in a way where you can delegate your rewards to just paying for your coverage, and you just never have to think about it. And being able to build this in real time, I think Bartosz and I, like he's in the audience right there, like we talked about this idea of a streaming vault 2 years ago, I think. We were whiteboarding it over Zoom. It was a very weird conversation to try to do over Zoom, but it worked. But I could imagine you can build something like that here. And I hope to help this team, build something like that soon. So let's change gears a little bit. These are the things you can build. Let's talk about what we did build. So as I mentioned, Helium was an L1. We migrated to Solana earlier this year in April. I think Toli in his keynote mentioned something to the effect that it was a pretty boring launch, which is exactly what we as a user of an L1 want. But I thought it might be helpful, and to go into some of the technical details of this, Noah on our protocol engineering team is going to be giving a talk tomorrow on the dev stage, so he'll talk about how he took 800,000 transactions and shoved it into a Merkle tree and passed it over. I'll talk another 40 minutes about that otherwise. So I'm going to skip that and talk about how we've done since then. So what did we actually do? And this is a pretty busy slide. We are seeing now, so there are about 150,000 active wallets migrated over to Solana. These are folks that were on the old L1. They opened their app. There's a permissionless migration function that they were able to sort of hit. Basically, they opened their mobile app. There was a little spinner, and they said, here's your tokens on Solana. And the app looked exactly the same on the other side. And that's the kind of user experience we think should exist for every single crypto app. You should not have to think about what's going on behind it. But you have to know that it is a self-custodial app. It is your token. It is your state. That is really, really important. So, about over 150,000 wallets onboarded, and even to this day, there's about 60,000 monthly active wallets. And these are folks who either claim their tokens for their rewards, they stake their tokens, they delegate their tokens, they are maybe using the network, they're burning tokens to actually use the network. These are all incredibly active folks, and of those 60, about 30 are using other Solana programs. So if any of you are building stuff in Solana and you saw a little lift in your usage, thank those folks, not me, because they're the ones doing the work. And it's been really, really incredible to be in the Helium in the Solana ecosystem and bringing the Helium ecosystem over, because we have a lot more composability with folks like HiveMapper that are already there. We're excited to work with the render team to help them move to Solana, and they're going to be talking certainly on their own. Don't want to spoil any of the surprises there, but they're going to be using some of the things that we were able to build. And then we get to work with teams like Top Ledger, Dune, who are building really, really great tools to be able to look at things on the chain, and especially we have a lot of data on chain with all of our compressed NFTs. So that's my time. If you want to, generally speaking, think about or get access to things that we talk about, that's at Helium. That's our main account. That's at Abai. That's me. I have some opinions about these things occasionally. So love to keep chatting. Thanks.